It's always awkward at the start. Hey guys, welcome to Stripping the Dipping live on this segment of an amazing episode that we have lined up. We've got a really awesome and special guest with us today. They're actually a recurring guest that we had last year that did an amazing piece with F1 Black, who I'm assuming is in the building too, because he's also one of the amazing additions to our show. Without further ado, I have Taylor Ferns, the most successful woman in USAC Silver Crown history, which is, wow, this incredible to say. This is an introduction to those who might not know about USAC or the USAC for short, essentially United States Auto Club. They're basically an organization that have commissioned like racing in America and have commissioned series like the Indy 500, which is huge, because even being on this side of the pond, when the Indy 500's on, everybody switches over from Monaco and goes straight over to the coverage in the States, just to see that happen. So, it's a huge thing. Taylor's worked throughout her career really hard and worked her way from, the junior categories of the midget series through sprints and now in the Silver Crown series, which is, one of the top series. If I had to make an equivalent, like, I guess comparison, it's almost like, well, it is basically the F1 of, like oval racing in that sense too, with likes of like AJ Fort and, Mario Andretti, which we've had on the podcast, and Black will like to plug there very cheekily too, and Al Unser. So, it's an amazing opportunity to have Taylor back with us once again. Taylor, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. Great to see you.
Oh, we're so happy to have you and privileged to have you back as well, because there's so many different things you discussed on the last kind of episode with Black. We kind of like what we do most of the time is we try to get an understanding of the individual, and to try and get the story behind the person in whatever field they're in, and you touched on some really interesting topics. I feel we're going to be the spice that we need on the first live episode back. So it's great to have. So, like there's topics in there such as women in motorsports. Is there an industry ceiling? The legal perspective as well with the amazing background you have, which similar to mine too. You're coming from a legal background myself, so
Oh, cool.
yeah. But
Cool.
before we get into that, Taylor, let's get into the first question. So, what are your New Year's resolutions? And a bird tells me in the form of F1 Black, it was your 27th birthday celebrations in December too. So, did you get up to much at all for your birthday? And what was your mindset coming into this new year?
Yeah, so to start off with my 27th birthday in December, I normally growing up, I've always celebrated my birthdays, luckily enough, in Indianapolis, Indiana, because it's always the PRI show, which anyone within motorsports in the automotive community, everyone goes to Indy for that second weekend in December. So was fortunate enough to spend some time with some of my motorsports friends there. But on my actual birthday, I had a final. So I had a law school final. So I spent it studying for trusts and estates. And that's how I spent my 27th. But on top of that, as far as like the holidays and coming into the new year, I was just thinking about this morning, and for me, my philosophy really is I'm always kind of like an ever evolving. I mean, all of us as individuals are ever evolving, right? But I always feel like I'm always trying to improve like every day as far as like self reflection. So I'm not the type of person to really have New Year's resolutions because I'm just always trying to better myself. But I always feel like though at the end of the year and as I've kind of gone through adulthood like more and more, I'm like I always feel like maybe it's just maturity, but by the time I get to the end of the year, I'm like, man, I am exhausted. So then after the holiday season, I guess now it's just like new energy, reinvigorated, and just ready to kind of keep going and building on a lot of the progress that I made on and off the track, not only just in 2022, but in the years prior, because I kind of go by like the building blocks of life. Like we're all just like continually building to get to like our purpose, our ultimate successes. So really, I guess that's kind of the resolution for me is just to keep progressing.
Of course, in relation to that as well, Taylor, would you find that, having that self-reflection and going back through the diaries and seeing what objectives and goals were made, what ones you could have probably improved upon or want to add to further, is it, would you say progressive in a way, or is it linear in terms of the progression from one year to the next and from stepping maybe from one style of car into the next kind of series, or studying one kind of year of law and getting through the modules on that to doing more evasive ones or ones that have more pervasive skills, would you say?
Yeah, so I feel like it's really all progressive. I kind of like mention to people when they say the word change, I don't really like that word because you kind of use evolve in verse of using the word change because everyone evolves based on like different encounters that they have with people, whether it's people from different cultures, different experiences. And so yeah, I mean people might say, yeah, you're changing, but like you might say in 5 years you might have a different opinion on a topic, like on something within F1 than you do now because you learned more about the conversation or the context. And so to me, like that's why I like to say like evolution, evolving. So I as far as like racing goes, like everything is progressive because it's all building off of like your different experiences and encounters, like racing different race cars, interacting with different mechanics. You learn and take away from things from like each person you interact with, but not only just in the racing world but in general. And so I've been very fortunate to have the opportunity to race and experience racing a lot of different forms of cars, like from Formula 2000 cars on the circuit course when I was involved in the Mazda Road Indy Scouting Combine when I was 15. So hard to believe that
Wow.
was 12 years ago. But then like I've also tested an ARCA car at Daytona and raced a stock car, and raced late models, and I've come from an open wheel background with the USAC midgets and sprint cars and silver crown cars. So it may seem they're like total polar opposites, but in reality, like everything is a way of just building off of each other. So like there's sometimes I'll come off a silver crown race and be like, you know what, I kind of race the car a little bit like how I race my stock car at Iowa or
Mhm,
something.
mhm.
So to me, like in some ways, if you think of racing it from like a ladder perspective, like yeah, maybe that is more linear. But if you kind of like bop around a little bit like I have, like it's all everything kind of builds off each other to kind of get you to where you want to be, which I mean for me that's victory lane. So
Of course, and we're here to obviously document it and obviously to be part of that as well because it will be amazing, Taylor. And again, just the stories that you gave on the previous episode with Blag as well, and talking about, the experiences, even just when things don't go in your hand. I remember you telling Blag about like a engine kind of mechanical failure you had with the radiator that started to overheat, and
oh yeah,
dealing with that, whether or not you take the gamble of bringing it into the pits, and then strategically actually more laps would get done in that particular scenario, and also the damage you could potentially cause to the car. And particularly, I guess, at that stage too, a lot of the funding, is quite limited or could be quite tight. So, it's amazing just your foresight. Even in the heat of the moment when things are under pressure, you're able to keep that composed nature. And it comes from all the different experiences as well. So it's amazing just to kind of see how that plays into it. And whilst we're here, let's read some of the comments. So Black here with the popcorn, because he knew that today was going to be a very spicy episode, one where a lot of truths are going to be told, which we love to see. We've obviously got Georgina, the boss lady, inside here as well. To shout out to Georgina as always for organizing these amazing events and for having amazing people like you, Taylor, join us. Of course, she's even got stars in her eyes, so
yeah.
we love to see that.
I saw
Black.
I saw Blag. Oh, sorry not to interrupt, but I saw he keeps coming unacceptable bragging with the beautiful weather. So that's what I forgot to mention. I'm in Florida right now, so I was like, I was gonna shout out to that.
Oh my days, yeah, no, you won't be too pleased with that because he's
Yeah.
always complaining about the weather, and I think that's just an innately British thing that we do over here as well. It's never too, it's either way too hot or way too cold, and there's never a middle ground. So
Oh
I
yeah,
totally get that. And for him, he's even saying this is meant to be winter
yeah.
in capital letters. So I get that. Whilst Georgina's just there in Sri Lanka with her coconuts, pina colada, it's living the life. So definitely. RVD in here as well saying, can't wait. We love that. Thank you so much, RVD. And Georgina saying, season 2 kickoff is awesome. There we go. And F1 Black saying, I sense you're going to make Dens geek out referencing all these cars. I am, because, again, like for myself, I do some sim racing. There's been like an Outlaws package, I think, that's been put on iRacing. So a
Oh
lot of the sprint cars are now on iRacing too, on the ovals and the dirt ovals and stuff like that. And it's
yeah.
interesting because I know you covered it on a previous episode, Taylor, but you're mentioning again, just even a second ago, how transferable like some of the driving techniques are. And even when you're in a dirt oval, oval, being able to drive with oversteer, being able to drive on the dirt and kind of drive with the car with the trajectory that's like angled and still making out of the corner in the fastest way is super cool. So to see that transition into other series as well, like IndyCar, for example, or Aero cars, or even like obviously the NASCARs as well, with the new generation of cars they have, I think it's fantastic. So yeah, so many different talking points there. So Taylor, let's get to the elephant in the room then, because like I think that it's something which, thankfully, or I say thankfully for me, in a sense, as a guy, I feel you don't understand how like how hard it can be for men. And I think the only person that really gave me that true insight was my mom, you know, because she came here as an immigrant. She had nothing when she came to England, and just the kind of stories that she told me about being, you know, a woman in a patriarchal society, you know, having to basically work from the ground up, you know, and having to basically deal with lots of nasty people in small circles where there weren't too many people that looked like herself, is, I imagine, something that you've been through in your career as well. And kind of the leading question before we dive into it a bit deeper, Taylor, is, you know, is there a glass ceiling in racing? Because I think I know the answer to that, and my opinion on that is very clear. But how has it been from your perspective? You know, like how is it being a female in a very male-dominated sector, which is motor racing and just the auto industry generally?
Yes, so this is actually something that not only I get, not that I get asked a lot about this often, but I think about it often. And actually, the other day I was actually just thinking about this. It's like not that, as far as like the glass ceiling goes, like whether you believe that's there or not. Like one of the big things is because like it wasn't even too long ago, like 3, 4 decades ago, that females weren't even, not maybe not even that long ago, females weren't even allowed in the pits. So, the fact that it's still a conversation, as like we still really haven't had like a real prominent female within motorsports. Yeah, we could say you had Danica or Sarah Fisher and Lynn St. James and Janet Guthrie, who kind of like got the ball rolling a little bit. We really haven't seen anything like super progressive as far as like even since Danica, really. I mean, you could maybe argue Haley Deegan. Um, but I think the sense is like we're still almost in the early stages of this in theory. But I still feel like we have a long way to go. So as far as like female representation, like I will say as far as like an open wheel standpoint and what I race with USAC, I took like 3 years off from motorsports to focus on my education and like because of a lack of funding and so on and so forth. And it was surprising to me because when I was a teenager, I was the only girl in the field in a lot of midget sprint car Silver Crown races. Um, and then when I stepped away for a little bit, and then when I came back racing, I was still the only girl within those divisions. And it was kind of like, why is there a lack of representation as far as like the very different genders go? And why am I still the only one? And so I don't know if it's like a perspective as far as like visibility. Like I know when I started racing USEC Silver Crown, I started testing a Silver Crown car when I was 15. And I didn't even really think like you Silver Crown racing is like the upper echelon of USAC racing. Like as you mentioned before, like Mario Andretti, who I know you've had on your show, on the Unzers, the Bettenhausens, like they all came from Silver Crown racing. But really before me, there were no visible females that raced Silver Crown. Like you maybe had like Aaron Crocker and Sandy Eden, like they maybe made like 1 or 2 starts, but before me, like there wasn't anybody. And so, like that brings me back to like I still feel like we're in the early progression in the early stages of this just because like I still really am the only one with like just being a sprint car race or being a Silver Crown race. And so um as far as a glass ceiling goes, I know that's kind of like a political topic. And so, but I think it just goes to show you kind of like the lack of representation. And then when we do have a female competing within the fields, there is a greater level of scrutiny against that individual. And so I think it's almost kind of like a turning of the tides, if you will. Like I think we will eventually get there, but I think it's all just going to be in numbers. Like it's a
Mhm.
proportionality thing at the end of the day. Um, and so I think females, obviously, I believe females can compete within motorsports. I know I can compete. I know I can win. Like I've already proven it. But it's just kind of almost like I just need to get that Silver Crown win, which I know we're on the cusp. But like it's definitely an ongoing topic, and being open to learning from different perspectives, I think really at the end of the day, because when I like obviously motorsports, I work with a lot of males. Like my entire team is males. Like everyone basically at the track I race against, they're all males. And so, talking with some of the race directors or even one of the leaders of the series that I race in, he's like trying to learn a lot from me just to get a different perspective. Because it's like with certain series, they almost want to pit females against each other. Like if you have like three females in the field,
Mhm.
literally I've taken screenshots of this because one day I'm going to write a really great book about it, and sorry if I'm getting long-winded,
That's
but
fine. Mhm.
they want to pit females against each other. Like they want to be like, who's going to be the first female to win this race in this series? Or I've seen a post recently to where it's like the best finishes by a female in this race, and then they ranked all three girls in a row on like which girl finished the best. And it's like we're not in our own little race mother to me. And I'm not trying to come across as like someone that's sensitive, because trust me, I am not. In order to make it in motorsports, you can't be sensitive. But I just think there's has to be a learning mentality from all sides, and people being willing to learn from a different perspective.
Yeah, I think that's fair, Taylor. And if you're sensitive, then I don't know what I must be because honestly, like I don't well, it's not that I don't understand, but just like you, I it frustrates me to know that we're in the 21st century, and even in this day and age, for women to be able to compete in the same platform as men, there's still like an obstacle to trade. There's still like a snotty attitude towards it. Still a very like a misogynistic approach to the way that women are perceived in motorsport, and it's completely wrong because at the end of the day, you guys are all drivers. You guys are there driving the cars and trying to compete to be the fastest. There shouldn't be a sub kind of division or kind of like a breakdown of the men or the women or the women or the age of the men. When everybody puts on their helmet and they go out to race, it's the fastest person on the circuit. And one thing that I think we get from Total Wolf is he always says that the stopwatch never lies. So it's the
Mm.
one factor which I think is what makes racing so cool, in the sense that no matter of your color, creed, gender, like it's just about who the fastest person is. But of course, to get into racing, there's obviously all these obstacles and trades and stuff like that, which you mentioned, which makes it harder. And then even when you're there, of course, there's even all these other factors which, prevent women from getting the kind of spotlight that they deserve, but also not in a patronizing or token gesture like way either, which kind of segues me onto another question in relation to this, Taylor, is, you know, what really needs to change, would you say? And also, what hope do you have when you see other things happening, like across the pond in the W series, for example, a spec series where you have like all females? Again, it was never quite clear what the winner of that series would go on to do. But even then, just like it's been running for a couple of years now, and now it got curtailed 2 races before the end of the season, and we don't even have a calendar for 2023. When you see stuff like that, what confidence does it give, people like us that are progressive and want to see more people in the space? And to the big wigs, the people that actually have money in their pockets, what can they do? And to the fans like me, which are quite not quite so affluent, but getting there, what can we do as fans as well to help, and to like make sure the message is at the forefront of all the media outlets and the people out there that can make the changes?
Yeah, so the big thing for me is because there is a handful of females within motorsports, but I feel like you always hear about the ones that have like the greater social media influence, but they may not be the better drivers and yada, 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 which the same can be said about males too. So that's kind of the double edged sword. But I feel like because we're like still kind of in this movement of trying to get a female to the top tier of motorsports, whether that be IndyCar, Silver Crown, or IndyCar, F1, NASCAR, yeah, however you view the motorsports tiers. I feel like at the end of the day, it's just elevating and promoting the right females, quite honestly. Like you hear a lot of these programs that they want to direct funding to females in motorsports, and then they'll select like a handful. And then I feel like me personally, like knowing up within like certain, like knowing about motorsports, knowing who's competitive and who's not, you kind of view like who they're selecting, and it's like, but really, are those the right ones that are going to achieve your objective? Like if you're trying to sell beer, imagine how much more beer you'd sell if you're going to select the right lineup of girls when people see that sticker on their car in victory lane. You know what I'm saying? So I just feel like it's a matter of people in higher positions with that investment money that they're actually made aware of who's actually worth investing in. And to me, that what is going to make people achieve their objective of seeing successful female motorsports is by picking the most competitive one, like the one that's capable of winning. And that's not really, I feel like, what we're seeing right now. Now, as far as like the W series go, I understand like their objective of what they were trying to do was they were trying to do that to give like the deserving female or females within competition reach Formula One. But like obviously you saw like Jamie Chadwick killed it, right? Like she was great. And so now we're gonna see what she's able to do racing for Andretti and Indy Lights. And so in that point, I feel like the W series kind of achieved in ways what they wanted to when you kind of hear some of the other gals within W series that are now going off and whether they're racing in Le Mans or doing some other type of circuit course stuff. And that way I feel like it achieved its purpose. I mean, people might want to argue like, oh, well, then it's females competing against females and their own little division. And I see that too. But I think it's really just all about like understanding like the different perspectives and the method to people's madness. But at the end of the day, like I feel like the people with the investment money like need to do more of their research on who they're allocating their money to, because if they're trying to sell their product, like I promise you, you will sell even more than the person with the most social media followers by picking the gal that's winning. So, and which is what I feel like Mobile One is doing. So like Mobile One came on board with me along with a younger gal that I'm mentoring, Katie Hettinger, who's coming up through the late model ranks, and then a few other girls that are actually winning. And to me, like, I think that's super important. And I think Mobile One is going to reap the rewards from that because they're actually getting inside scoop on what the real deals are. And so I think that's what's really important.
Absolutely, and shout out to Mobile One as well, because again, I feel even though it shouldn't be the case, that a lot of these, companies and brands, they're being quite selective, like you mentioned, and quite kind of cautious about how they want to do it. And I feel that if a brand or if a company is very passionate about something, they should just apply themselves to do it. Because at the end of the day, I think the real fans, the real people that actually consume the sport, enjoy the sport, buy the product, and keep it alive, get it, and they want to see the competition. They don't want to see the same person winning all the time, or they don't want to see kind of one kind of legacy go on. I think one thing I always say, and what we're trying to do last year on the podcast, is we're encouraging people to, take a bit of a break from the rose tinted glasses of F1 and enjoy IndyCar, because there's so many different stories and so many different drivers. The more experienced ones like Scott Dixon and Will Powers, to kind of mediocre guys there in terms of like, Joseph Newgarden and those guys. And even just the younger kids as well. Some of them that have come from Formula One or kind of open wheel backgrounds, like Callum Eilert, and now kind of like pulling the rope, or I think even Christian Lundgaard had quite a few good races there last season too. So just to kind of see that, and to see that brands like Mobile One are on board, is amazing. And I think just to kind of echo RVD's point here, smash that glass ceiling, because if we don't, I know you mentioned it early, Taylor, about like being, not wanting to be too braggadocious about it or not being too kind of political about it. But I think we need to, because, I think the English saying is that empty mouths don't get feed. So if we keep silent, if we just continue to watch injustices, if we just stay silent and stay dumb to things which we know are injustices, then it doesn't give anybody any incentive to actually change it, and actually to look at themselves and then to look at it from a more full-rounded perspective. So I think it's amazing, that we have people like you. And actually, well, I'll get onto that in a second. RVD was asking about the crown or the path from Silver Crown into IndyCar. We'll get into that just in a bit, but we'll definitely answer that question. Black saying, don't hide your affluence then. So listen, Black, I'm just a normal guy from North London. I don't know what you mean. I'm just a normal working class guy. I'm one of the workers out here. And RVD said, did you call Newgard mediocre? No, not mediocre in terms of like his abilities. It's like middle age. So you got the older guys on the block, like Scott Dixons and the Will Powers. And then you got like the kind of middle-aged guys, man. A bit like, Joseph Newgarden, although he's really, really buff and goes to the gym and eats a lot more protein than I could probably consume in my entire life. So that's my word on Joseph Newgarden. But let's get to another thing which makes me smile, and is kind of a progressive way into it, is women in motorsport as a group. Can you tell us more about it, Taylor, and give us more of an education about just this group, how it was formed, how can people become involved in it, and what are the objectives as well with women in motorsport?
Yes, so Women in Motorsports North America is a group or community of professionals within motorsports that was really formed to kind of promote, elevate, enhance females within motorsports overall. So, not just from a driver's perspective or in driver's roles. Really, it could be as team owners, engineers, mechanics, like really trying to find jobs or roles within motorsports for females if they're interested in it, or like females that are in motorsports, whether as a driver and they may be out of funding, like how do we keep them and maybe place them in different roles so then that they can stay within the field. Like I said before, just kind of getting back to the proportionality, like the numbers game. And so the group was started by Lynn St. James and Beth Peretta in the midst of 2021, and formally launched at the beginning of last year. And so Lynn St. James has been a mentor of mine since I was 12 years old. And so she asked me to be one of the founding members. And so there's about 30 or 40 of us that are kind of on the main board of like really successful elite professionals within the motorsports field. And so, it's been a lot of fun, and it's been learning and being open to, again, hearing from different people's backgrounds and like their experiences. And so really I think the overall goal is just to increase in numbers as far as like females within motorsports. And so I know that overall we're trying to slowly integrate different programs. Like we slowly started to integrate a mentorship program, which I was the first mentor that we had as a guest speaker middle to late last summer. And so I know Beth is kind of wanting to ramp that up a little bit more. And then hopefully maybe progressing into mentorship classes aside just from like the sessions that we do. Like I think we did it over Zoom and it was like with an audience of people. But just kind of progressing it from there. Like we had a really successful and great summit at Charlotte Motor Speedway in October. And we obviously had a really great turnout, raised a lot of proceeds for WIMNA, in which we'll be able to hopefully reallocate that and disperse that accordingly. However, the main board decides to do that. So I don't know if we'll do grants or whatnot, but we really just want to promote the females that are currently within motorsports, but then also encourage and welcome others who want to join in, and definitely find a role with them anywhere within the field, and not just as a driver, which has been like super open mind, like has opened my mind to different possibilities and possibly different career paths when I am eventually done being a driver, which I don't even want to think about that yet, but definitely a different
Well,
perspective.
yeah, absolutely. And I think, as you mentioned as well, Taylor, like it's important that we have that kind of openness, and also groups, amazing groups like Women in Motorsport North America, where people can actually learn more, get more integrated, and have the opportunity. Because I think one thing my parents was used to say to me is, opportunities and experience don't always work hand in hand. And at least if you have the experience, at least if you're able to meet somebody in the sector, at least if you're able to talk to somebody, a problem, shared is a problem, halved in a sense. So I think it's great that, we have more groups like this as well. And, I implore people to actually look into this, to join if they can, and to actually, try and contribute something if they can as well, because this is really key as well. And I think something we've wanted and needed for such a long time as well. And then you mentioned it as well there, Taylor, in terms of just different roles, like not even necessarily being a driver, although that's obviously like the halo kind of role you all want to grow up and do, but
Yeah.
even just in other aspects too. If you look at, like, for example, I think it's Alfa Romeo Sauber a couple of years ago, they were run and like managed by a team principal, Manisha Katterborn, which ironically also had a legal background too, being a contract lawyer, and then managing an F1 team. We've had the likes as well of Claire Williams, which was, the team principal as well as Williams Racing. We've now seen Susie Wolf, Total Wolf's other half, looking after the Formula E team and winning that too. And just generally, even just in terms of strategy, Red Bull have their strategist. I think her name is Hannah Smith, is the technical strategist for Red Bull Racing as well. So I'm so happy that we live in a day and age now where you're starting to see more representation. You're starting to see, women in these high profile positions as they deserve to be because of the right candidate and the right person for those roles. And,
Mhm.
Red Bull have had so much success. Sauber is a team that's been running now for years. And, without Manisha and her way of running the team and her legal knowledge for sticky situations and stuff like that, they might not be around today as well. And even Claire taking that kind of like dynasty from Frank and running the business and being able to kind of promote the likes of George Russell from Williams into Mercedes as well is a big deal. And I think people take for granted, the amount of work that women do in these fields as well. So to segue into another question, Taylor, because I feel that you're like an amazing juggler. Like, so you have the racing, but you also have like the legal pedigree as well. And I guess I'll share it to our listeners too. I myself had come from a legal background. I did 3 years as a law undergraduate at the University of Nottingham. I guess like yourselves in the States too. In the first 3 years of undergraduate, you don't really specify in a specific law. You just do contract law, employment law, sports law, family law. Like there's a range of ones you can go into. And then
Mhm.
after I was done with that, my parents basically said, "You're going to go and do a master's. You're going to basically go and do an LLM because we think that you would be better off if you had, like, basically a higher level of education to give you more opportunities." So I was
Mhm.
like, okay, I'll go and do it, reluctantly. And I went and did my LLM combined with a legal practice course as well. So even just from my perspective, guys, it's no easy job at all. And just the amount of hours, the amount of studies. Taylor, you mentioned as well that you're basically doing your finals on your birthday, which I can't think of a better birthday present, but shows dedication. How do you manage, like, work life, obviously study life or educational life, and your private life as well with family, friends, and stuff like this too?
Yeah, I think, like, for me, the main thing is just, like, mastering overlapping everything in ways, because I do kind of, like, joke around and say, like, I should join the circus one day with, like, all the, like, juggling that I'm doing with all the stuff that I'm involved in voluntarily. But, yeah, just, like, I kind of live like this flexible lifestyle in ways. Like it's flexible, but it's not because I definitely have to stay organized. Like I live by the calendar in my phone, and definitely stay organized and then like try to stay on top of my schedule that way. But at the same point in time, like my remote, like which my job is one of my sponsors, the Sam Bernstein Law Firm. We now ever since COVID, we've been working remotely, and so that gives me great flexibility. As in, like if I need to be right now, I'm in Florida working from. We're Michigan based, so I'm in Florida right now working. I work throughout the day today, and then like tomorrow I fly back home to go to Indiana. So like I'll be able to clock in when I get to Indianapolis and work from there. But from the other standpoint, as far as my law school, I have to be in person for that. So as far as like I kind of like travel, like my travel schedule is super crazy because a lot of times I have to go back and forth between places so I can make it to and from class because I have to be in Detroit, Michigan for class.
Oh,
And
wow.
so that definitely makes me like I have to plan ahead of time. So I'm like, okay, if I can only miss 5 classes a semester for just one of my classes, like, okay, I need to pick and choose like where can I be then, and like kind of even leave one class as a buffer. Like there is no sick days. Like there is no sick days. And so just kind of learning how to overlap things. Like right before I hopped on the call here, I was working this morning and I just like told the legal team that I work for, okay, I have a hard stop at this time because I had to get on a call. And so I think it's being flexible with my time, but also just like letting people know that I mean, I like to think I'm superwoman, but we all have our days. And so I think it's really just being upfront with people. And if I can't do something, like I wish I could do I wish I could do everything that people ask me to do, but sometimes like I'm only one person, right? We're all human. So can't push the limits too hard.
Of course, definitely, Taylor. And I think, I agree with everything you said there. The key, I guess, to it is mainly just being regimented, trying to stick to a diary, but also having the flexibility as well, because no 2 days are exactly the same. Like you
Mhm.
mentioned as well, we're not all robots, although most of us think you're a superwoman, so there is that. But
Yeah.
yeah, just in general, just like it's not easy, but of course, if you have a passion for something, if you really love something, if you really want to make the most of an opportunity, you have to kind of be able to make sacrifices and to put 110% commitment into it. No one ever gets into anything being average, or being respected as average. It's often the mentality of being great and being dedicated and putting those hours in, which will make the difference between being here and being all the way at the top, which I think, is highly commendable. Now, one other thing as well, Taylor, I wanted to ask you, is like, you mentioned Sam Bernstein, like law firm as well, which is amazing because like it's also cool when you see big brands on sides of cars as sponsors, but to see them as the actual law firm you work for on the car as well, super cool. How did you get to work with them? Because even for me, I've got a kind of funny story where I was working in a Mercedes dealership because originally when I was applying for work experience, all the law firms like, yeah, Dens, your CV is great. We love your charisma, but we're just looking for somebody with a tad bit more experience because
Yeah.
there'll be a couple of people moving on next year. We kind of want somebody with a bit more kind of like skin in the game. I was like, skin in the game. I already have skin. Come on, you know. But no, they're like, So I spoke to my mom. She's like, rather than just fixating yourself on just trying to work with a law firm, why don't you try and just find a job where you can get people skills and learning to deal with people, dealing with complaints, dealing with difficult scenarios and circumstances, and those skills you will learn are transferable to what you'll do in the future. So, spoke to I think it was the deputy team principal of a Mercedes dealership. I told him
Mhm.
how passionate I was about the car and the manufacturers and stuff like that as well. He gave me some work experience, and from there, they could see that kind of glistening kind of excitement. So they gave this, I think, 19-year-old kid the opportunity to work there without a license. So I wasn't really driving the cars either. I was just like drooling all over them most of the day. And then
Yeah.
one time, this guy comes in, he's looking at the cars, and all the salespeople are running into the offices because like this guy's gonna waste my time. I'm not gonna get my commission. So I was like,
Mhm.
oh, that's a bit unfair. You can't judge a book by its cover. So, I
Yeah.
made conversation with the guy. And to cut a long story short, it turns out that he was one of the partners of the law firms across the road.
Oh.
And, just on the off chance he'd come in, he'd see in a C class and he's asking me about the car, how much power it had, its fuel efficiency rating. And even from that, he was like, what do you do? You're quite young. So I mentioned, well, I'm an undergraduate at the moment. Our aim is to get into the legal sector and to do something either in commercial property or conveyancing or even just contract law. And
Mhm.
just from there, he gave me his business card. We got talking, and it was really, really pivotal. And when I tell people that story, they're like, it's just luck. But I feel sometimes you have to put yourself in the right position in order to benefit from that luck or to get that kind of opportunity. So, yeah, was it something similar for you, Taylor, in relation to, working for Sam Bernstein?
I think it definitely, and you could probably reciprocate this with their story. Like that was just like part of your destiny. Like it all just comes back to working really hard, and just pursuing your passions. But I had started working at the Sam Bernstein Law Firm right after I graduated with my bachelor's degree. So it was my first real job essentially. And I first started off there as an intern. And a week later, I was promoted to the operations director. Now, what a huge jump from just being an intern to then running the entire office, right? And I did that for like 4.5 years, the directorial role. And I worked closely alongside the CEO and the president and the COO and became close with all of them. And I wasn't even really racing at that time. Like I said, I had taken some time off from racing. And then I'd gotten to the point to where I was just going to start racing a little bit. Like my dad had bought one of my old race cars back and he's like, "Oh, we're just going to do this for fun. Like it'll be a fun family thing." And I don't think they really expected me to take back to it and be as competitive as I was and like right off the bat. And so, especially with the marketing, like the intensive like competition within marketing as far as like personal injury firms go in the United States, I was like, you know what? I feel like this would be such a great opportunity. Like this is my job, so I don't want it to be a conflict of interest or like intrude on like my salary or my bonuses
Mhm.
or whatnot. Like I put a lot of thought into it, but I asked the Bernsteins if they were wanting to just come on board for a little bit on like to help out with my racing. And they did, and we shot some commercial spots, and it kind of like tumbleweeded into this really big deal. And I mean, it's a great story too. Like, I'm their employee, they sponsor me, I go off, and I'm kind of like almost like this racing star, short track racing star in a way. And people are like, "Where's the cross? Where's the intersection here?" But I think that all comes back to like if I didn't work there and if I didn't work as hard as I did, like I really busted I still bust my butt for them. And I think of them as like my family. And so I think really that just paid off in hindsight. And then aside from that, like I also started doing some things like you were saying before, like when you follow your passions and pursue your passions, like things and ways just kind of happen for you. And so I think the Bernstein sponsoring me is just kind of like reciprocal of that. But then also like to bring more attention to my sponsors and myself and like my off track efforts. I was like, okay, what's a great way of like how I could use like my legal degree and like mix it with my motorsports degree aside from like my law firm sponsoring me. So now I write a monthly column now for Sprint and Midget Magazine and Speed Sport, which is big in the US. And so I was like, I mean, I write a lot for law school. I write a lot for my work. Like, why don't I do that and kind of combine that with my motorsports career as well? So, and I feel like really, if you see like my off track product, I feel like it's just almost as successful as my on track product because I just feel like when you follow your passions, like things just happen. So, I'm really grateful for that and really grateful like, for the Bernsteins and a lot of my other partners that have come on board, like Mobile One. So excited to see where 2023 takes me.
Oh, it's gonna be so exciting there, Taylor. I know it is, because just how like organic the journey's been in that sense, and also as well, just you know, you mentioned obviously being like well, Sam Bernstein being so great to you in terms of giving you the opportunity and kind of like sponsoring you, but also I feel you're a great ambassador for them and putting their name out there and also being a really strong representation, women at the forefront, women, able to break ceilings and barriers which have been there for decades and actually, like being able to represent them in a very positive light as well. And even with the column you do, even though obviously one's kind of like a column and more kind of like off the track and one's kind of more kind of like centered on the track, there's
Mhm.
still kind of like connection between the two because you're so authentic in the way that you come across. So I wouldn't be surprised at all, and it's amazing to see that. And that kind of begs the question onto the next one, Taylor, is what is motorsport law? Because I mean, I can kind of cheat on this one because I know that it will comprise of a couple of things. But, to the young kid out there, that's wanting to be a solicitor one day, wanting to be, like a grand jury judge, or I don't know, something like that in that nature, an adjudicator on contracts or something. How can you merge, let's say, on the legal side, like law with motorsports in terms of either contracts, in terms of the business element of it? Like what kind of crossovers would you say there is, to maybe a student or a potential kind of graduate looking to kind of look for opportunities in the field?
Yeah, so motorsports law is definitely something that I'm spending a lot of time diving into even more, because it may be like a field that I'm looking into when I'm done with law school. Um, but I have connected with a really great attorney within motorsports law, Lori Eberhardt. She's based out of Charlotte, North Carolina, and she's a partner in a law firm, Apollo Sports and Entertainment Law. And so, really, motorsports law is kind of a segment or a sector of sports and entertainment law. And so, I know a lot of what she does kind of centers around contract work, like as you had mentioned, whether it be with drivers, teams, like sponsors coming on board with a series, tracks, and just kind of like an overall extension from that. And then I know with some of her clientele, like there's so much more to just contractual work, maybe just seeing like what liabilities they're open to, and things of that nature. And then I know aside from that as well, she does like a lot of like mergers and acquisitions, like business planning, so on and so forth. So it is kind of centered around almost like a business mindset, if you ask me, because I feel like I've gone through a lot of that stuff as far as like business planning, mergers and acquisitions from like my business degrees and my master's in business. And so I just feel like it's an extension off from that while also mixing in with the sports field as well. And so I'm really lucky to have kind of like Lori as like a shoulder to lean on as I learn more about motorsports law as well. And I've taken a handful of sports law classes in law school so far. So I'm learning more about antitrust law, and Title IX and things of that nature. So I'm actually taking a sports law class this upcoming semester too. So really excited about that. And I think it's definitely a great field. It's obviously a niche, but an extension off from motorsports law is sports and entertainment law. So you probably wouldn't just be practicing motorsports law unless maybe you worked for a team or something. So yeah, super interesting stuff.
No, it is, and this is the thing as well, Taylor, where I'm so glad that we actually do these podcasts, because when I was a kid kind of going into schools and stuff like that, it was unheard of. Like, like either you were a doctor, a lawyer, or maybe the dodgy guy at the end of the road with some TVs that didn't have like a kind of owner. It was one of the three, and just to actually know that law can be so pervasive that there's different sectors that you can get into as well, particularly in the entertainment field, as we love racing, but more importantly as well with motorsport teams, motorsport law, sports and stuff like that as well. There's always going to be a need. There's always going to be a need for legal assistants and representatives and partners and stuff like this as well to oversee the big contracts and deals and stuff like that, to make sure that everybody's getting a fair cut, and actually what a team, a brand, sponsor, athletes getting into is what they should be getting out at the end of the event. So I think it's really interesting, and definitely as well, like we'll be looking forward to more of your articles and stuff like that, because I feel it's something which a lot could be said about too, which is really intriguing. And kind of segue as well, you mentioned that, Taylor, is the important and art of networking and connections. Smooth segue.
Yeah.
Like,
I
how
love
important.
I love talking about networking.
Oh well, it's so important. Even with this story I gave as well, like I probably
Oh
wouldn't be even
yeah.
be where I am today had it not been for the experiences and just networking the way I did. But from
Mhm.
your perspective, Taylor, tell us then, how important is networking and making connections, and how does one go about doing that? If you're an introvert like me and you end up in a cave with like loads of model cars and a trophy.
Yeah, so I always say it's not about what you know or even how much money you have. Quite frankly, it's all about who you know. And so
Mhm.
I've learned over time that I really love networking. I don't know if it's because I've like basically was thrusted into this field to where I had to learn to talk to people when I was 12 years old without having like my parents talk for me. Like honestly, probably a huge I should credit Lynn St. James for this, because I will never forget this for as long as I live. I was literally 12 or 13 years old, and I was at an event at Daytona International Speedway in Florida. And I received an award that night from USAC in Lynn, the Kara Hendrick Spirit Award. But prior to that, they had this massive networking event. And so imagine like a preteen, early teenager being thrown into this field with all these corporate execs, and I know nobody. So I kind of had to go up and learn how to talk to people. And I definitely very quickly learned kind of like how to break the ice, or if the conversation got awkward, and I try to pass this on to younger generations. I'm like, oh, just start talking about the weather or like things of that nature. But, anyways, like since then, I've always done a lot of these events to where networking has been super important, and definitely have become like really confident in just walking up to random people and introducing myself. And that goes along with that, and having a business card handy. Like that has gotten me, I feel like, really far as meeting the people and talking to the people that I should be talking to. And so I did a lot of that when we had our WIMNA event summit at Charlotte. It was basically a big networking event. And then also at the PRI show, like I had talked about earlier, that's like a 3-day basically seminar networking event in Indianapolis. And I met a lot of people then. But it's not even just initially meeting them, it's also following up with them and keeping the conversation going because you never know. And it's not even about like how they can help you, but really making it about how you can help them too at the same
Mhm.
time. And so even if like you don't even have anything reciprocal to offer each other, like you never know down the line. And so it's just establishing connections and keeping those connections. So some of the younger girls that I mentor now, I kind of tell them like they're 14, 15. I kind of say, whoever you meet now and get business cards from, like start a spreadsheet because you never know, like 10 years from now, you may run into like I'm running into people that I met when I was 14. And so like you just never know how that relationship may pay off. And then even like I said before, even though it's not about like how that relationship may help you, but kind of like how you mentioned you met that individual, you kind of had an open, candid conversation with the individual and they basically were able to help you out in what you were looking to do. That's kind of like how it all goes, right? And so like networking with Lori, and I saw Lori at PRI, and then she introduced me to the like managing partner of Speed Sport, and then it kind of goes from one thing to the next, right? And so you just never know. I mean, I got my Mobile One deal through networking. So that it's really a super important thing. And I actually just my business school that I graduated from and got my bachelor's degree from, they actually have reached out to me recently and was kind of like asking me for advice to like pass on to business students at the school, and I
Mhm.
like really emphasized on this. Like it's really all about who you know, and just kind of how you manage those relationships and um kind of carrying it on from there and making them long term. Like they shouldn't just be short term things either. um it's just kind of like growing a plant, right? Like my dad always kind of passes on what my grandfather used to say about how like treat everyone equally, as far as like even within business. Like
Mhm.
my grandpa used to say, like, you see that small tree outside, like one day it's going to grow into this massive oak tree. And so you just never know who somebody, like, don't disregard anybody you talk to either, because you never know who that person might be down the line. So that's kind of, to me, the importance of networking and connections.
Absolutely, and beautifully articulated as well, Taylor. Because again, just like it's so key, and I think, a lot of people might get disheartened if they get like rejected or if they don't get a response to an email. And these are all human things, of course, but I feel it only takes one. It only takes literally one person, and that one person could completely change the complexion of how everything looks for you in terms of opportunities, in terms of future, like partnerships or agreements and stuff like that as well, like you mentioned. And like you mentioned too, also try not to put too many eggs in one boat as well, because at the end of the day, everybody has a purpose and everybody has a specific thing that they're after.
Mm.
And as like, people in such an ever-growing and fast-paced business, nothing's ever static. So you always are changing, you're always evolving, you're always progressing through different things as well. So you'll
Yeah.
never know, like you mentioned, where one door might become a slight closing door, another one will become open as you unlock new chapters in life as well. So
Yeah.
that is super
Exactly.
key.
And it's not like even if one door closes, like another one opens, and it's not even like if an individual, if you reach out to somebody and they can't immediately help you out, like it's okay. Like maybe just kind of like facade that relationship, because you never know like down the line. And so it's not, don't ever write somebody off. And so like I feel like I'm a living example of don't judge a book by its cover, and like networking has really got me to, I feel like, part of where I am today, aside from my hard work ethic. And so, but networking is definitely a key thing in anything in life, like not just racing.
Of course, it's so like, like expanding in that sense as well, and applies, I think, in all facets of life too, in terms of people that you meet and, opportunities it unlocks for the future as well. So definitely, and I'm really glad that we talked on that too.
Mhm.
Now, Taylor, I've got Blag asking a really cheeky question as well, but we'll get back to that because unfortunately I woke up, man, and I was a bit disheartened because we had the sad news of Ken Block, and again, he is one of my favorite drivers, growing up. Like, I
Mhm.
feel I kind of grew up, and probably same thing for you as well, Taylor, in that PlayStation generation where we play video games and we see people drifting cars and doing stunts. And I feel that Ken Block was more than that because, he came from like a world rally kind of background and, used his skill set and his amazing personality, to interact with people, to create the whole hoonigan brand, to have the Gymkhana kind of like competitions. I think
Mhm.
he was part owner in the DC Shoes as
Mhm.
well company, which was amazing. It's like like getting an American's perspective as well. Like how big was Gemblock and how do you think he'll be remembered? And just as a driver, like how would you rate his skills and his ability, to drive in competitive stuff like the WRC? And to do all the cool stuff, like driving a 65 Mustang over two helicopters and a ring of fire. Like, there's just so many different things.
So I feel like even though even if you don't know that much about rally car racing, I feel like everyone within the motorsports community like knew who Ken Block is just because of like the whole Gymkhana and how he like represented DC shoes and the whole his business and Hoonigan, which I actually learned about more last night, unfortunately, after I found out about his passing on social media. But I really feel like it's like really affected the motorsports community, but even outside of that, just because he was so prominent and well known. And so it's definitely, I think, a major loss to our community. But I feel like his legacy will live on and all that he was known for and all the things that he did. And it actually, what really struck me about it was obviously it was a motor or snowmobile accident. I believe that they had mentioned. And so, not to kind of like turn the tides, but for me, it was kind of like an emotional thing because I was in a snowmobile accident when I was 17.
Oh,
And so it was kind of like almost like reciprocal in a way. And so, I mean, it's super tragic and feel really bad for his family and definitely thinking of like his loved ones because it was not only a loss to his immediate family, but I feel like to the entire motorsports community.
absolutely. I think well put there, Taylor. Sorry, got a cough there.
No, you're
Just trying to like hold it back in, but no, just again, I think you summed up everything perfectly. Like he was a really great guy. And again, just when we watch motor racing and stuff like that as well, there's the competitive element, but then there's also the entertaining element. I think Ken was brilliant in kind of combining both and giving like even like more casual viewers that didn't know anything about racing or the pedigree of ovals or
yeah,
dirt or stuff like that. Just a taste of being able to drive on basically any asphalt and being able to make a car do anything. And like you mentioned too, just that reputation he had as well within the community will mean that you always go down as a legend. So,
yeah,
huge send off to Ken Block as well. And it's refreshing just to see just the number of people from this different backgrounds coming out and mentioning just like, his legacy. So
yeah.
also here,
So
let's
there,
read a couple of
just to add
sorry.
on to that, like it was so crazy. I'm glad that you said that because I'm thinking about it this morning, like seeing all the people from different racing backgrounds, like specifically, like whether it's from IndyCar, rally car, motocross, like everyone is posting about it. And so I really think that kind of shows like his impact just on the community overall. Like you could lay over probably a blanket over everybody because it's just like he kind of intersect was a way of intersecting like all the different sectors of motorsports. So I just sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I just wanted to add.
No, that was fine, and in a way, thank you for that, Taylor, because you made my point too, and some of what Mary's saying too. Ken was a legend in rallying. Yep, absolutely.
Mhm.
Mary also said, remember Top Gear Barbados Challenge in 2014? I do remember that. So I don't know if you've seen this clip, Taylor. I'll send it to you later. It's like really funny exhibition event in Barbados with Ken Block in I think it was like a very heavily modified Ford Fiesta rally car or rally cross car, and Lewis Hamilton, I think, in Michael Schumacher's W3 Mercedes F1 car, and they're both doing kind of
Oh,
an
cool.
intersecting kind of race of champions kind of event to see who would win. And I
Oh,
think Tanner Faust was there, and he was putting his money on Ken Block as well. So like
wow, that's cool.
again. just to see just how respected and how loved Ken was as well. And Lewis took that as a champ as well. Lewis and I think Ken both as like ambassadors of Monster Energy, I
Yeah,
think are two crazy and really cool individuals as well. So
yeah,
talking about Ken in that way, there's just so many memories like that which invoke kind of like things which are so cool or things he did which I don't think anybody's ever done in that regard. So he always be remembered in that way.
yeah.
So for sure. And we got Blag with a very cheeky question here. So I'm going to put on my examiner voice, Taylor, because imagine this came up in your law exam. So, exam question. Did Article 15 give Michael Massey full control of the safety car, overriding Article 48? I plead the fifth. I'll let you answer Blag's mysterious question there.
So I'm assuming this goes into perspective of like the last F1 race, obviously 2 seasons ago.
Mm,
So I'm assuming in that point in time, I mean, based on the how they ruled it initially, I would say yes. But then I feel like there was a lot of repercussions from that for him specifically. So I feel like didn't someone come back and say that he didn't have the right to do that? Am I wrong?
I think you're on the same
Yes
path
and
as I
no.
would have been, Taylor.
I
Yeah,
feel
because
like it's like initially yes, and then but then if they reverted him back, then they would have kind of recanted Verstappen as the champion, which they didn't do. So
which we'll start
but
another army.
in theory, under the assumption that I mean, really, Verstappen kept his championship, so really, Massey made that call. So,
True, but
is there a
I
right or
don't.
wrong answer to this?
I think you do get the 15 marks or whatever is the examinable grade for this, Taylor. But for me, I'm just gonna stick with pleading to the fifth
Yeah.
before I start another
I
like
don't.
wildfire.
I don't have any skin in the game on this one. I'm
You
just.
don't have a dog in the race in this one, eh?
I didn't
Great.
even. I missed the race, so
Okay.
I didn't see it, or I just heard about it and I read about it. So can't rely on media.
And Black's immediate response there was, "This is at what work where you ask a lawyer for a firm view and they respond with millions of caveats and legal jargon. It's like you're already qualified. See,
Yeah.
see.
That's why I answered the way that I did because I was like, okay, there's different ways. There's a bunch of different perspectives on this one.
True, true.
He
You
should
can't. I
ask
mean,
Meg what his answer is. I feel like I might now
yeah. Let's do that. Let's do
I
that, Till. Let's
feel
put
like
Black under some fire. That would be good.
see
That
some
would
of
be
his
good.
I see some of his tweets, so I feel like I know.
Oh gosh, oh gosh. Oh, Mr. Black is an amazing guy, if I do say so myself. And very
Oh,
outspoken on
no,
certain
he is.
things.
He cracks me up.
But actually, another question as well to ask you, Taylor, before we get on to the ones that were on the list as well. We did have it from RVD, which I think he's still upset with my Joseph Newgarden Media Corps accidental reference I made earlier. But like, what is the path between Silver Crown and IndyCar? Is there a straight kind of path between the two, or would you see yourself doing Indy Lights? Is it in between? How would that work to answer that question?
So right now, it's kind of if I was to go from like so if I wanted to go on a Silver Crown to IndyCar path, I would have to run some Indy Lights races. Um Also specifically because I know IndyCar, at least specific to the Indy 500, you have to race at least 2 Indy Lights races before starting the Indy 500 unless the ACUS board approves you. So
Mhm.
that's kind of like a caveat in there. I'm pretty sure unless they change the rules, this is what I was reading on last summer. So yeah, typically like the stepping ladder from Silver Crown to IndyCar would be doing, or now it's Indy NXT, Indy Next.
Mhm.
So yeah, that would kind of be the stepping stone. And also if I was to go straight in IndyCar now is so circuit court, like it used to be evenly split between ovals and road courses, and now it's more leaning towards more road courses. And actually the Indy Light schedule or the Indy Next schedule is like even like 85% road courses. So definitely if I was to go the IndyCar route, would definitely have to do probably a season of Indy Lights.
That'll be interesting. And again, like, where I think, like you mentioned earlier as well, we're going to see Jamie Chadwick in that kind of like field as well. So it'll be interesting to see how she'll come across the likes of Miles Rowe and other kind of drivers in that kind of series too. And
Mhm.
Mary asked earlier, I think we kind of answered it, but I'll let you have the flow with it, any Taylor. It's just like, like what do you enjoy more in terms of racing? Because she mentioned W Series, which we talked about before she actually got here, to be fair. But like which one would you say you prefer more in terms of like open wheel kind of like aero cars, or more kind of like NASCAR kind of more stock cars? Is there one kind of racing you lean more towards than the other? And would you want to compete in W Series if it were to ever come around again?
So my generalized answer is I just love racing. I'm a fan of racing. So I will race whatever I can get in.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, I am leaning towards open wheel racing. Like racing in general, there's so many variables that go into it, but I just feel like coming from an open wheel background, again, I didn't do that much late model stock car racing. But just from like what I initially experienced, like I love racing my sprint cars. I love my USAC Silver Crown cars, and I just, to me, like open wheel racing has my heart. As far as like considering if I would race the W series, I have actually considered it.
Mhm.
Actually the directors at USEC had actually kind of like submitted my information because they were kind of like advocating that I race a W series as like a representative of USAC. And it ended up coming out that they were kind of looking, I hate to say this, but they basically said I was too old.
No.
And they didn't directly come back to me and say that. I don't wanna say they didn't
Okay.
directly come to me and say that, but they were I didn't even get a response, but I think that they were looking for, like, more teenager age as far as like almost like a grooming type of field.
Okay.
So I was just because there were females my age that were initially competing in it. I don't want to be taken out of context. Do not take me out of context. But just from like what I heard, I think that they were trying to start like to get into the younger age brackets. And so yeah, that was also like before like this last season. And so yeah, I just never heard a response basically. So I have considered it.
Hmm. Well, I don't know. Me and Black gonna have to send them some fiery emails after this, Taylor. Sorry, I'm joking. We won't do that. We won't
No,
quite.
don't say do not take me out of context. I said basically I was getting the vibe that I was too old.
But actually, to lighten the mood on that one, Taylor, like let's talk about a dream kind of hot lap experience then, because you're talking about like, from a general point of view, you'd race anything and actually open wheel's been your life. But let's just say, like money's no object and no barriers. It's just literally you can have the keys to anything you want around any circuit in the world. Which car and which track would you pick?
Hmm. So initially my instinct says an IndyCar at IMS.
Ooh.
Or I don't know, like I feel like saying testing an F1 car somewhere. Like maybe like the streets of Monaco, but I don't know if that's I mean, obviously that's a bucket list
Yeah.
place I feel like for anybody. I mean definitely an F1 car, but at what track? I'm not sure. I would just say Monaco, just because I just feel like it's a bucket list destination. But my instinct says the IndyCar at IMS first.
Ooh, I think they're both great options there, Taylor.
Yeah.
But then, to kind of caveat, then you mentioned Monaco, but how about Belle Isle at Detroit? Because that to me was a really physical circuit in the sim. So many bumps, so many undulations,
Yeah.
walls that are literally like right next to you, like riding a bicycle in the living room.
Yeah.
Like are there any particular circuits on last year's IndyCar kind of roster that, really spoke to you, or ones that you've always dreamed of racing on as well, like the Laguna Secas, or some of the street circuits, or the ovals as well?
Yeah, so I mean Belle Isle, like that's basically just that's near my hometown basically. And I was actually at the IndyCar race this or last summer. So that would definitely be cool just because of like the town effect and because there's so much history to that. But now they're going back to the streets of Detroit, which that will still be really cool because I feel like that's where they are like what they initially used to do.
Mhm.
And then they went to Belle Isle and they're coming back, or I don't know if they started Belle Isle and they just kind of hopped around. But as far as like circuit courses, as like the streets of St. Pete, I feel like is legendary from like the IndyCar perspective. It would be cool. I've been to the Circuit of the Americas before. I've never tested anything there though, so I think it would be cool to take some laps around there in a car, and whether it's IndyCar, Indy, NXT, Formula One, that would be cool.
Hey.
Um, but yeah, I haven't really dove into kind of like the road course list very much. I know I did test a Formula 2000 car at Sebring once before, and that was cool. Um, so yeah, that's a really great question.
Well, we love coming up with them here at
Yeah,
Stripping the Dipping,
that was
Taylor.
thought provoking.
We'll read some of the responses as well. Let's see. So, we got Neil inside here. Neil, what's going on? Thank you so much for joining us, and Happy New Year to you as well. Happy New Year to all you guys tuning in, because it's amazing to have you guys showing support, and actually taking part and interacting with our amazing guests such as Taylor. So, Mary saying W Series is back this season. I didn't know if that was confirmed, but if it is, that can only be a positive thing. Let's see. Mary saying that she would take Mercedes F1 W11 around the streets of, well, the circuit of Kyalami in South Africa, which again I think is a really epic, blend of corners for a car like a high downforce car like that too. So that'd be awesome. And to wrap it up there, or to kind of bring it near the end there, Taylor, you know, let's talk about then your goal. Your vision is to get into IndyCar, and in 3-4 years' time, I'm going to be telling people I interviewed Taylor Ferns on the 3rd day of January in 2023, and it was the most awesome podcast I did amongst all of the ones I do. And now she's in IndyCar kicking people's ass like Joseph Newgarden. How about that? But to talk about that, then Taylor, let's like get into this. So if or not if, when you get into IndyCar, which dynasty would you like to drive for? Is it Andretti? Is it a Chip Ganassi? Is it AJ Foyt? Is it Penske? Which one of the kind of dynasties would you like to drive for? Who would you like your teammate to be as well? And actually, to kind of like mix this question up as well, if you had to pick a celebrity to be your radio engineer or your crew chief, who would you pick as your crew chief?
Oh shoot. Okay, so off the top of the bat, the team I would have to say is, I mean, racing for whether Ganassi, Penske, Andretti, that I take any option. So I'm being open-ended about this, but obviously Andretti sticks out to me. Like, how can you not like want to like kind of like steer towards that direction? And I work closely with Marissa and Women in Motorsports North America, and I've connected with a lot of the executives there. So I actually just toured their shop recently in December. So they're a great group of people. And so definitely instinctually, I would go with Andretti. As far as like my teammate goes, does it have to be like anyone that's competing now or literally just anyone in general?
You know what? I'll let you guys have a free car team that year, so you can pick just anybody on the current roster of the IndyCar grid,
Mm.
and just like maybe a fellow racer which you've raced through in midgets or sprint or silver crown or any of the stuff that you've done as well. Because it'd be interesting to get a blend of both of those answers.
Yeah. So I'll say if it's someone within the field now, like I think Scott Dixon would be a great guy to learn from. And just kind of he has so much history and like experience and obviously a great legacy within the organization or as far as like IndyCar goes. So that would kind of be like my first instinct of like somebody that races within IndyCar now. As far as anybody in general, I would have to say one of my biggest competitors within the Silver Crown series. His name is Cody Swanson, and he's won the USAC Silver Crown Championship a bunch of times now, and just really hasn't gotten that big break to like go on and pursue anything else. And so I think it would be cool to kind of like see him in an Indy car and us race against each other in an Indy car. And Cody was actually one of the ones who kind of who basically taught me the ropes in Silver Crown racing. And
Ah,
so that would be kind of a cool combination as far as if to pick anybody from a teammate perspective. And then the other question was, you had anybody like as a crew chief or celebrity on the radio?
yeah. So you have to pick a celebrity to be your crew chief.
Oh geez. Well, obviously we're competing to win, so I can't pick any comedian or anything because I wouldn't take it seriously.
True.
If we're going for the most laughs, I mean, I love Kevin Hart, but we're going to the racetrack to win. So let me try to think. That is a tough one. Hmm. Michael Jordan.
Ooh, that Taylor. Before you expand on that one, that's a brilliant one because straight away you're just reminding me of the number 23 car in the NASCAR series and him and Bubba Wallace and just like him having that kind of Joe Gibbs kind of relationship as
Yeah.
well. Just
And
yeah,
I watched The Last Dance for the second time, like just last week, and I'm just a big fan of his mentality. And so I've kind of been ever since I've started back up racing the past few years. I just have to say this. So sorry if I give out off topic, but I've been kind of labeling the past few years as like what I think is like a theme, right? So this is kind of Phil Jackson-esque. I don't know if you watched The Last Dance documentary
I
on
did. Great documentary.
yeah. And so like last season I was just kind of doing like a mixed schedule, and so I named it the Taylor Ferns tour because I was doing a lot of speaking engagements, off track stuff, and a little bit of racing. But this upcoming year I'm coming back full time. And
Mhm.
so I'm calling it the comeback tour. And so I'm kind of
Ah,
like I'm going with this Phil Jackson vibe. And so but I love like MJ's mentality, and like he like goes to win in whatever it is he's doing, and that's kind of how I think I am too. So I think that's a winning combination.
mhm. I think that's the best way to be. And like you mentioned there too, like MJ is just it's not even just his success as an athlete, it's his business acumen, it's his mentality, to kind of adversity. It's his ability as well to pick up his teammates in those days when you had Scottie Pippen or Dennis Rodman, which was
Mhm.
notoriously quite a difficult character to kind of get on board with. And again, just even now, you're seeing that even at his age and kind of stuff he's achieved, he's still putting himself out there. He's still trying to learn more. He's still trying to kind of like, look at different business ventures and ways that you can give people that maybe didn't have opportunities the opportunity to take part in sports. So again, like he's done some amazing stuff over the years, and I think he'd be an amazing crew chief as well. Bit scary, but I think
Yeah.
you definitely find a bit between
Oh
the
well,
teeth
yeah,
if you
that's
came on the radio.
celebrity. I know that he would figure out if there's a way. That's why I feel like if we're going with a celeb, it's gonna be MJ.
Oh, it has to be. That has to be. It's a great choice. It's a great choice there, Taylor. And let's look at some of the kind of questions before we get off here as well. Some of the comments. So Mary saying, Taylor, give Caitlyn Jenner a call and watch out for Latifi as well. Oh gosh. Oh gosh, here comes Latifi slander. But yeah, that's always one thing. Nia saying, motorsports law sounds intriguing. It really is, because like we talked about as well, Nia, I think you came just afterwards, but the podcast is going to be up as well, so you can catch it afterwards. It's just, it's so pervasive. And I feel like I mentioned, like growing up in school, there wasn't like a direct path or there wasn't kind of a clear ideology of how you'd get there. But because of people like you, Taylor, like actually now there is kind of like a path, and people like you are the trendsetters, I feel, for the next generation, which are going to make, pass into that kind of like footway. So it's super important. And I feel as well, it's an amazing job and a commendment to you as well, Taylor, for the amazing hard work you do and the resilience that you show week in, week out, day in, day out. And, that you take no prisoners with it. You just like keep your best foot forward.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, you're more than welcome. Well, Taylor, I mean, before we wrap up, like any final words from you at all? I know we talked a lot about different stuff like the Women in Motorsports, North America group as well. Are there any individuals you wanted to plug on the podcast? Are there any guests that you want to see on an episode of Stripping the Dip in? And, just any final bits of advice as well for the kids out there, that aspire to be as awesome as you in the future.
Yeah, so I think, like, in conclusion, like, we definitely covered a lot of the bases and a lot of the aspects, like, of my life and of the industry, and so, I mean, great interview, so thank you for having me
Oh,
on, and so I think at the end of the day, like, all of this, like, just encompasses, like, the never give up attitude, even if you, like, start to doubt yourself, like, there's gonna be a lot of self-doubt no matter what you do, but if you're pursuing your passions and, like, what's right, like, you still are gonna have a little bit of self-doubt, but I feel like at the end of the day, like, it'll be worth it. And just, like, work hard. Like, a lot of, like, the stuff that I'm involved in, like, you can see, like, my work product, like, of how hard that I work as far as, like, talk coming on and talking with you and, like, all the interviews and the media that I do, but aside from that, like, the articles that I write and the newsletters I send out and how active I try to be on social media, just to kind of increase my exposure, but it all comes back to the never give up attitude and your work ethic. And so I appreciate you for having me on and letting me highlight that just a little bit.
oh, no worries at all, Taylor. Honestly, like, for us, it's important because when Georgina approached me on this podcast, literally around this time last year, I was like, what's the premise, Georgina? Because there are thousands of podcasts out there. Everybody's trying, everybody in the dog has a podcast these days.
Mm.
And the kind of premise from her was quite clear. She said, I want to tell stories that haven't been told. I want to explore voices which, are undermined or not listened to the way they should. And I want to build a community of people, that are going to come together and actually, celebrate and actually, eulogize together and actually make something bigger of what already is out there, and when we have amazing, talented individuals like you, Taylor, it makes it so much easier because I think perspective is quite important. And it's, the amazing individuals like you that give us these stories, that give us these insights that kind of like, remind us that, even in our daily lives and stuff that we get onto in a normal day, that, sometimes not everything goes to plan 100%. But even still, if you put the right attention, the right mindset, the right commitment, like we just talked about, anything's possible, and that you shouldn't take no for an answer, that you should always kind of go and try and achieve the things that you love. And it might take a year, it might take 5 years, it might take 10 years. Nobody knows, but the journey is often sometimes actually more beautiful than the destination itself, I feel.
Exactly. So it's also I try to remind myself, even though I don't get a lot of downtime, it's also about enjoying the process too. So we're all a work in progress, and so it's just like learning each day and enjoying everything that we're doing now because we'll eventually reach our destination wherever that may be.
Exactly that, Taylor. And again, just I know I asked this earlier too, but is there anything else you're really looking forward to this season? Also, I got to ask you this as well, since you're a huge IndyCar fan as well. Who's your money on for the 2023 IndyCar title, and who do you think is gonna have the ring at the 500 this year?
I don't know. I think it'd be interesting to see. Is it still? I think it's still up in the air if Elio is going to come back or not.
Mhm.
But I think Newgarden has obviously been a contender the past few years. It'd be interesting to see how well the Andretti's cars do. Like I'm pulling for them, and so I think that they'll have a good year as well. So we'll just have to see what happens. Like anything
Ah,
in racing.
it's going to be so exciting, Taylor. And again, before we go as well, Taylor, where can our viewers find you? Because, I'm sure a lot of them are returning viewers from the episode that you did with the incredible F1 Black. So make sure you guys go and listen to that one before as well if you want to know more about Taylor's background and also the kind of fundamental, the kind of foundational stuff into getting into this position. But also just like, where can we follow you? And are we going to see more vlogs? Are we going to see like you on YouTube? Where can we find articles and stuff like that as well? Let them know so we can all follow that and support you too.
Yeah, so everyone can stay up to date with my website, taylorferns.com. I try to update and post on that as far as like my latest news articles, my schedule, so on and so forth. Aside from that, on my Facebook page, I'm really active on that. My Instagram, my Twitter. I did start vlogging a little bit. I tried to like I kept up with it very well, at least like the first half of last year, and then I just like got so wrapped up into like everything that I was doing because I work on the cars, but and everything else that I'm involved in. And so I kind of staggered off there, but I'm hoping to kind of keep that get that up and running this upcoming year too, and stay consistent with it. But I'm on all social media platforms, and like I said, my website, and I try to be consistent as far as like posting everything that I'm involved in on all forms of my media. So just kind of keep up with me there.
Ah, thank you, Taylor. That's like splendid. And as always, we'll make sure we put a link in the description. I'm sure Black's gonna do an amazing job as well of like taking like elements of this whole live as well and putting it into bite-sized chunks too. So we'll be recirculating that as well. But Taylor, from us to you, wish you all the best for 2023. Thank you so much for your time because that is one of the most valuable things that we can have. And of course, we wish you all the best again with the series that you're doing, with all the hard work that you're putting in, and just know that you're an inspiration to all of us, because it takes one special person like you to kind of give somebody else hope, and to inspire the next kid and to inspire the next generation. So keep up the amazing work that you do, and I'm so honored as well to have this opportunity to actually finally catch you, because I missed you when we did the Black episodes. Now I finally have this live too.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me on. I enjoyed our conversation and looking forward to maybe we'll do something else again in the future. But if not, wishing you guys all a happy new year, and there's lots to come. So I'm sure we'll talk soon.
Oh, absolutely, Taylor. Well, you're invited onto the platform anytime at all. And yeah, we definitely need to have a few catch-ups throughout the year as well, in relation to just how you're doing, the IndyCar stuff as well, because I feel that just gets bigger and bigger every year as well. And also, just to kind of just see just like the progress and just hear about the new projects in the world of, like females in motorsport, and just that kind of wave of progression as well that we're all aiming for in this year, the year after, and years to come. So Taylor, thank you a million. And guys in the comments as well, guys watching this, thank you also just for your kind support, for tuning in, for listening. Make sure you share this as well, and like and subscribe as always too, trying to grow the platform and the podcast, to greener and much broader branches than it's been before, as Georgina would say. And it's amazing we have guests on like Taylor Ferns too. So make sure you go and follow on all the social media platforms. We'll update the bio, she'll all be there as well, and we'll be circulating this around because the world needs this energy. Until next time, guys. Taylor, I'll give you the final word as well.
Yeah, no, just thanks for having me on, guys, and continue to chase your dreams. It's a new year, so let's start it off on the bright side. And I try to share positive energy, so I hope everyone got that.
Well, positive meets positive, and also shout out to RVD as well. Thank you, man, for your comment too. We really appreciate it, and it's amazing just when we can come together and have moments like this as well. It's great. But guys, until next time, make sure you subscribe to Stripping the Dipping as well. Make sure you follow us on Twitter for any latest updates with our guests, with any Twitter spaces that we're going to be doing as well. Make sure you obviously follow Taylor, as I mentioned before. Check out her website. And yeah, guys, it's been your boy AMG Dents, the modern day Morgan Freeman, just a normal guy from North London. And all those taglines aside, I'm out. Peace.